Hey everybody, welcome back to Example of Play. In this video, I'm continuing my learning game of EU5, playing as the Lordship of the Pale, trying to form a Ireland and then make it become an independent country. We've covered a lot of things so far. In this video, we're going to look at people and culture, dealing with that and what we can do under this society tab a little bit. And then we're going to look at international organizations and touch on the one that's specific to this game, the Lordship of Ireland, which gives us some options we haven't used yet. So we're going to dive into those things. They are parts of the game that aren't immediately obvious, but are important, especially over the long term, depending on what your goals are. So let's jump into it and get started. So we're going to start by looking at our society tab here, which we've kind of clicked into once or twice before, but we're going to look at actually using it to do some actions this time. And underneath, there's three big tabs under it, and of course they each have more things underneath them. But culture, religion, and people. Religion we'll probably save for a future video. We're fortunate that we are all Catholic here in Ireland for now until the Age of Reformation happens, which could mix things up a bit. But really, pretty much all of Europe is Catholic at the start, so you don't have to worry too much about that if you're playing a European country. And you can even hover over it and see, yep, everybody. Now, there's other stats here, but we won't dive into all that too much. Now, the people tab is useful. This is giving us stats of like our actual demographics, like how many people are out there, what type of people they are. You might not take actions from here directly, but it gives you kind of an idea if you're trying to figure out what's going on in your country, looking at the big picture. So we see the pops, which is like the word the game uses for people, and how they're broken down, how they're tracked. So you have like what their social class is, how many there are of this particular type, what their culture is, what their religion is, where they're located. Then over here, their literacy, if their needs are being met, and then their satisfaction or their happiness. So you can even sort it and say, who are the happiest people in my country, who are the least happy, and then you can hover over that to see why, which there's plenty of reasons. And we can see actually we have quite a bit of the nobles here down at the unhappiest category. But of course it's there's a lot of, because it sorts it out so in such a detailed way, there are a ton of categories here. So we can't make everybody happy, but we can use this to kind of get a broad idea of where the big problems may lie in our country. We could sort it by the size of the pop, so how many are in that group. And we can see that, okay, the first category, the biggest one, they are happy. And as we go down, we have a few with some unhappiness. And then our first that's really unhappy is tribesmen, who we're not too worried about as a social class, to be frank about it, because we're trying to convert them to be commoners anyway. But they are very unhappy for their reasons. Now there's other tabs here. There's rebels, which we have some rebels. We can see here, there's some unhappiness. We're going to try to fix some of that in this video. That's slowly building out there, but we don't have any actual active rebel groups doing anything just yet. And we have dynasties, which I'm going to save. I'll probably try to do like a character video later, going into some of the individual character actions you can do, so we haven't really messed with that yet. And to be clear, I don't know enough about this to really talk about it, so we'll just slide past that. That's like the mini Crusader King stuff going on in this game. And then under characters here, this is where you actually see all the characters in your court. So these are all the people in your nation who you could assign to be like your cabinet members, or to marry off, or to try to form like some royal marriages, that kind of thing. We haven't had too many opportunities to do that stuff so far, but these can also be people who are like your generals and admirals and all that. But this is where you can actually see all of them together and kind of sort through them and see what you got available. But we're going to look at the culture tab now, where we can actually take some drastic actions that will really change up the outlook for our country. Now, looking at this tab, there's a few things up here at the top we'll look at real quick of our kind of broad cultural stats. We can see we have cultural tradition and influence. These things play into sort of the culture war that's constantly going on in the background of the different cultures, kind of pressuring people to switch from one to the other. And depending on how you're playing, what your goals are, you want these to be higher to get people to come to your culture for greater harmony. But it depends on how much you want to invest in that, whether it matters to you. And here our primary culture right now is English, even though we'll look at in a minute how that's actually a very small part of our population, which is driving a lot of the unhappiness in our country. But you can see here how the English culture, where its strength comes from, primarily from England, which makes sense, but also all the other countries where English is the primary culture plays into that. And then there's a lot of things that can affect it. Looking down here, we can see our assimilation rate. So assimilation is converting people to your culture, your primary culture of your country. And we see the only modifier is spiritualist, which lowers it quite a bit. And looking at that, spiritualist is one of the societal values, which we haven't dug into that screen too much just yet, but it's one of those things where it's on a band between spiritualist and humanist. And when it leans spiritualist, you get more religious conversion bonuses. And when it leans humanist, you get more cultural conversion, cultural assimilation bonuses. And they're kind of opposites in that way. Which right now we're more spiritualist, and so we're getting this negative modifier here. We can see accepted cultures. This is kind of a big problem for us, trying to figure out how to sort this problem, is that we start the game, our accepted culture capacity is only 1, but we kind of have 3 cultures in our country that are vying with each other. And so that's given us this, you start the game out with this over the limit. And whenever it's too high over your capacity, you get big negative modifiers to cultural tradition and influence. Basically saying that, yes, we do have a primary culture that is it's actually a tiny part of the population, which we can see down here. Yeah, I guess we'll jump down here to show that English is the primary culture of the Pale, but it's only 4.8% of the population. So less than 5% of the population is the primary culture. And then everyone else, 1/3 is Anglo-Irish, and then 2/3 are Irish. And so you can see where you get this problem of you're over your limit here, because there's a conflict of, we have way more people who are not the accepted culture. Actually, they have an enemy opinion between English and Irish. So 2/3 of our population culturally are considering each other enemies. So that's not great. And so having that over the limit gives us these negative modifiers, who are tradition and influence, which makes sense. There's like a conflict between these cultures. You're not going to be able to influence them as much because they see each other as enemies and they're outnumbered. Our country can't, it's like a societal conflict. And then also the impact that it has on our actions as a government are that the efficiency of our cabinet has a negative modifier, which it's had since the beginning of the game. And there's just nothing you can do about it right away. It's definitely a long-term problem you have to solve one way or the other. Now you can see it here that, yeah, the Irish are tolerated, which puts us here on this limit. And then we only have +1 that we start with for our capacity. There is a tech that you can research here in the Age of Renaissance that will help us out a bit with these things. So if we're looking at Age of Renaissance institution hasn't quite got to us yet, or we can't afford it just yet, either way. That hasn't spread to us yet. Once something spreads to you, you'll see it up here. We touched on this before, so I'll show it. Once one of these new institutions of each age spreads to your country, you'll see how much it spreads. So right now, like banking is in 50% of our locations. And then you can embrace it, which costs stability and money. And then this cost will go down as you get more, as it spreads more. So there's modifiers you can get to spread that more. And basically it's like a new revolutionary idea, but once you kind of spread it all through the country, it's easier to convert over. If you try to be an early adopter, you can like as soon as it touches your shores, you can embrace it, but it's way more expensive in terms of stability and cost there. And so we can see, yeah, here. So this one is spread to 75% and it's cheaper, 25 gold, 18 stability versus, yeah, it's like half as much since it's more spread to 75%. Now, back to the topic at hand, if we come down here under Renaissance, we can see that like this one gives us +10% to those tradition and influence modifiers, kind of mitigate some of that. And then here, this gives you +1 on your culture's capacity. Now, there may be other things that help you with that as well. I haven't seen them just yet, but this is an early game thing that you can do, relatively early game, that you can pick up some more capacity. Now, in our case, if we did pick up that extra capacity, it still wouldn't solve our problem. We'd still be at 2.75 of 2, so we'd still get some negative modifiers. So, and then, oh yeah, just touching up here, artists and works of art. As you go through the game, you'll get chances to pick up through events mostly. There may be other ways to do it, but early game, you might get an event where you can spend a bunch of money to hire an artist, and then they create a work of art, which then shows up here. I have one so far, the Orb of Firna, that if you hover over it, you can see that it does give you some bonuses. So to your country, in this case, it only affects Dublin, so just that location, which is the biggest economic center of our country, so, and where a lot of our people are. So it gives us all these nice little modifiers. Nothing game changing, but pick up a few works of art, you get some bonuses. That's nice. And then if it was like because it says it's a masterpiece. It's like 75% quality, so it's pretty good, but apparently not quite good enough to have a nationwide benefit. But you could have a work of art so great that it increases the prestige of your whole country every month just by having it. So watch out for those. But early game, they're really expensive, and they, you might just not be able to afford it at all. But come back over here, we'll look at our culture breakdown. And this is really the heart of what I wanted to get at for this part of the video. So looking here, we can see the cultures in our country. You can hover over them to kind of highlight where these people are in the world and in Ireland, but also everywhere else. And you can see there's Tuscan, somehow, Northumbrian and Welsh, which are in at least in Ireland are very small. They're less than 1%, less than 0.01% of the population here. So another country, you might have a ton of stuff here, but for us, almost everybody is either English, Anglo-Irish, or Irish. And so what can we do with that? So right now, if we look at this icon, it's telling us that English is our primary culture. Because again, we're a dominion of England. We're kind of ruling on behalf of England directly. So English is what you start the game with as your primary culture. Of course, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's less than 5% of the people. And that leads to this inherent conflict of people being unhappy because their culture is only tolerated and it considers an enemy. English and Irish don't like each other here at this point in the game. What we can do to change that, if we hover over these, Anglo-Irish is kind of in between. And so that's an interesting thing. It's going to be, we can come in here and see like, okay, who is in the Anglo-Irish category? So it includes English language. And then under that, and then language, I've found there's some interesting stuff with language in this game, but we won't get into it in this video. But there's like a legal language, like the language of your courts, the language of your religion, that really is a thing you can mess with in the game to have some big long-term effects. But we'll focus right now on just, they speak English, okay. Under that, though, we have culture groups, Hibernian and British, which includes English, of course, and Anglo-Irish under there. And then Hibernian includes Irish. And we can hover over those also to kind of see where they are, which is handy. And then we have Irish down here, which is 2/3 of our people. But if we look at these icons here, we can see, okay, that's primary with the little faces in the star. And then the green checks means they're kindred, so that they really like each other. So English and Anglo-Irish really like each other, so that's good. But then Irish is considered an enemy. So cultures could have opinions of each other. That can go, there's like enemy, negative, neutral, and then like friendly, I don't remember, and then kindred I think is the best one. So there's like kind of a spectrum that they can go on. And then if we look over here, we can see, okay, if we hover over it, we can come down here and left or right click will do things. So we can remove them as a tolerated culture, which probably is not going to make anybody happy at all. Or we can make them an accepted culture, and we're looking at the Irish here. And that only costs 5 prestige, so it's a pretty cheap thing to do. In terms of that, but what it will do is mess up our cultural capacity even more. So we're going from tolerated to accepted, and it actually bumps up our cultural capacity use by the 7.81, which is like 4 times our capacity is 1. This is 7.81. So doing that would cause our modifiers, our cultural modifiers, to be just like into 0, and then the efficiency of our cabinet to be dropped a lot, because we already know right here, this is what we got. Well, I moved the mouse just a second too fast. So we can see here right now, we're already getting a minus 17% from being 1.75 over. So if we go like 8 over, that's going to be tough. Like our cabinet actions are going to be really slow. So one thing we could do instead is look here. We could change our primary culture to being the Anglo-Irish, which is kind of in between. One thing I wish you could see is, and maybe there's a way to see it, this I'm just not seeing here, is how 2 other cultures see each other that's not one of your primary cultures. So like everything we see here is like what English thinks of that culture, the English view in each direction. But it would be nice if I could see like, how does Anglo-Irish feel about Welsh, for example. And maybe there's a way to see that. If you do know, put it in the comments. But one thing we could do, because Anglo-Irish includes English and Irish underneath it, my thinking was, okay, if we make that our primary culture, which is a thing we can do, then that would make relations a little bit better, and so maybe our cultural capacity hit wouldn't be quite as much. So if we look at that, we see, we're going to try this out. We can see our cultural capacity, if we make Irish accepted right now, 7.81. if we first change Anglo-Irish to be our primary culture, which has a pretty big hit to our stability and our legitimacy. So I'm gonna do it right now. I kind of saved the game here and then I kept playing and then came back to the save. So really you would want to build those up some more because right now we're at 37 and 57. And so going negative on stability is never ever a good idea. Not worth it at any time. And then dropping legitimacy to 7, not good either. So you could wreck your country taking this choice too early. But for right now, just to demonstrate it, we will do it. So we'll just left click, and then just like that, we have embraced and changed our primary culture to being Anglo-Irish. And you can see, yeah, now we're negative on stability. So yeah, don't do it like this, but I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. And now if we look, we see, okay, it changed there. And now we see Irish is only negative. So it'd be nice if they were at least neutral. You would think they could get there, but since they're Anglo-Irish, they're like in between. But negative is better than enemy, at least. And then if we look and see if now we were to adopt Irish as an accepted culture, it'd only be 5.29 better. Better than 7.8, but still not great. And then we can see right now our cultural capacity, though, is better. We're only at 0.91, so that helped on this, but it didn't necessarily change too much for us right away. Except once we start going... Oh, wait, that was... Never mind. Now, if we go ahead a little bit, we can see, okay, we get all these disasters and things pop up. That's why don't make your stability go 0. But I want to try one more thing. Let's see if we make Irish be an accepted culture, which we know it's going to make that one number go way over. And we'll say, okay, we'll live with that just to see what happens. Because there is something else important that changes. If we make Irish be accepted, now we go forward a little bit and we see that, yes, our culture capacity is way over. So we have negative 44% on our cabinet modifier. But wanted to tick ahead a little bit. We'll get this message that now we have gained cores. So all of these locations are now cores, which a core now, instead of having the integrated status, it has the core status for a location, which gives max control plus 20%, which is way better. And also it's going to make the people there be happier because they are considered part of the culture of the country more so than they were before. And if we look here, say at this location, and look and see now our maximum control, I should have pulled this up before, but right now, all right, these locations, since we haven't run the clock yet, they're all sitting at 0. But if we look here now, max control is now 26.7, from 0 to 26.7 by changing it to being a core location, from being just an integrated location where the people weren't accepted. Now we've jumped that up a ton. And it's kind of same thing here. We look 16%, even though I think that's like the furthest location proximity wise. Here, 14%. Here, we can go up to 18%. Like in the last video, we talked about how important control is for our economy. And now by making these changes to our culture, we can see these huge increases in how much control we can exert over an area. Because now those people are more part of our society and our government. Now, of course, don't do it like this. Save up those stats first. Otherwise, right now I'm facing a succession crisis or a coup attempt at any time by taking those decisions too early. But I wanted to show that, how you can do that. And then I'm going to load up a different game later on so we can see how much our control has improved after making those changes under a little more stable conditions and letting some time go by to let that control boost up. Which, reminder, you can use one of your cabinet actions to increase control. It increases your max control, but more important for us here, it increases your monthly control gain. So like if you do this, you can go from 0 to the max on that location a lot faster by using one of your cabinet actions and kind of switching between the different provinces till you get them all boosted up a lot faster than if you don't. So here I'm going to stop and jump ahead so we can see what it looks like in the future. All right, so now this is further along in this save game. It's now 1404. You can see the situation has changed. We control a lot more of the island, and then one of the Irish states is kind of consolidated to be our main rival that's still left over here. And yeah, we still got some border gore going on, a little messy. We'll clean that up eventually. I acquired all of this in a war that had just happened that I think I kind of just got drug into. I didn't start it, but I ended up winning decisively and just taking land from the Irish states there. And so now if we look at our control situation, very different. We do have a bunch of zeros up here because I just conquered all that land. So now it all needs to be integrated. That's going to take some time. But that's kind of the price. If you take a bunch of land all at once, you're going to have a bunch of unhappy people for a while that you don't really control at all. But back here, where we kind of started the game and it spread this area where we had a bunch of zeros before, now we're getting some decent numbers. We're getting in the teens and 20s and a little in the 30s. And then close to like our capital, we're getting way up there, 80, 79, down here, 75 along the coast. So you can see we're getting some pretty big shifts in our control of these locations, which is going to get us more money coming in, depending on what's available there, of course. But like Tipperaries, where the silver mine is, it's got a potential tax base of 24. We're up to getting 1.45 from them, which is a lot better by getting that control boosted up to 24%. And so you can see how over the course of the game, and then if you change up that culture to make those locations go from being, conquered to integrated to cores, you get this big swing in potential control there from negative to plus 20%. It's negative 10% when they're conquered and then plus 20 when they're a core. But you have to take multiple steps. You got to integrate them. You need to figure out how to make those people be an accepted part of your society and culture to make them become a core, because I think I didn't even mention, for them to be a core, the majority of the people in that location need to be your either primary or accepted culture in your country. So if you don't accept the Irish, they make up the majority in everywhere that's not along the coast. Along the coast, you got your Anglo-Irish. Your English is such a small percentage, it doesn't really matter. But along the coast, you have Anglo-Irish, so you can make some of those cores. But once you go inland, it's all majority Irish everywhere. So until you accept them, you're not going to get cores there. Or the other way around, you could convert them, assimilate them into your Anglo-Irish culture. Assimilating them into the English, maybe you can do, but since they're enemies, it's going to be a really long way to go. But Anglo-Irish is a little more in between. You have a little better chance. You can gradually over time, maybe we could assimilate them to make those locations be more Anglo-Irish. But if we just accept the Irish culture, which now is 3/4 of my country, then that's a quick shortcut to making them become cores. So it's kind of a trade-off of which of those things you want to do for your nation to grow over time. And then looking at this save game, one thing you might have noticed over here is now I have 3 cabinet positions. So how did I get that 3rd spot? Well, I'm going to load back to an earlier save to show how you can do that, and we'll talk about another topic, international organizations, which have been present in the game the whole time, but I haven't really touched yet. So let's switch save games again. All right, so we're back in 1385 with our much smaller Lordship of the Pale with much less control. But we're going to look at international organizations. So down here at the bottom, depending on which country you're playing, you'll have different ones, but you'll see these big icons here if you're part of one. And there could be different ones pop up over the course of the game. It just depends on who you're playing. But one, if you're playing anywhere in Europe, you're going to have the Catholic Church, which is a huge one, a big part of the game that you can dive into if you're a country that has a lot of religious influence here. For us, we don't have that much control over it. We're just kind of just a member part of it. And I feel like this could be a video by itself, because look how many, there's like 6 tabs under Catholic Church just showing you everything that's going on. There's options, there's doctrines, there's trying to like get control of the voting of yeah, all that stuff. And then of course, if you could be controlling the Pope, then great for you. You got a lot of control over things, but we're not going to dive too much into that. Now, the other international organization that we're part of that is definitely one we have direct control of is the Lordship of Ireland. So you're part of this from the beginning of the game. If you click on this, it pops up. It gives you a bunch of things here, a little description of it. We are a dominion of England trying to rule over Ireland, which makes sense for who we are. You can see there's laws. There's only like one law we have that we could spend some resources to debate it and change. There's a few options there that give different things. And then members. So at this point, there's just us and our vassals are the members of the Lordship of Ireland. And then you have kind of an opposite organization that I'm not sure if there's a way to see it from here. Maybe there is, but if you are playing one of the native Irish states, then you're part of, I think it's the High Kingship of Ireland, which is sort of like the opposite of this one, where you're trying to form Ireland as a kingship rather than the lordship. And then down here, you can see that there are quite a few actions you can take. I hadn't really touched these earlier in the game till someone commented on the video somewhere that, oh yeah, you can actually use this to get a third cabinet spot. And I didn't realize that, because if you come here, you see, all right, you have a bunch of options which are not necessarily always available, that lets you do some different things, which we'll touch on. But the really important one that is a good tip if you're playing as the Pale is you can bestow lieutenant status, and you can make one of your vassals a lieutenant, which if you hover over it, it says, okay, it gives them the status, it gives them some bonuses, which is fine. You know, you want to prop up one of your vassals, making them a little stronger. Sure, you can do that. But what as far as I can tell, it doesn't say anywhere there. There's no way of knowing till I did it. But if you say, okay, we'll make Desmond be our lieutenant since they're our biggest one, you say, okay, and then you go forward a second, and oh yeah, we get a third cabinet spot. Now we have third, so that's 3 instead of 2, but that's huge because that lets you take another cabinet action, which are these variety of actions that are really strong, that can really shift things and like set our national strategy of what we're trying to do, of like increasing control somewhere, assimilating people, cracking down on rebels, stabilizing, just boosting your stability, boosting loyalty from your vassals. So many really powerful actions that at the beginning of the game you can only take 2 of those, and there's a tech in the Age of Renaissance that gives you 1 more. Over time you get more, but knowing now that you could have a third one from the get-go playing as the Pale, that's a pretty good tip. So thank you. I didn't get the name of who that was, but yeah, very good tip that you can take that action to get that third spot. Now, you also have some other stuff here, so you can invite nations to be part of the Lordship of Ireland. So one way, instead of conquering everyone, is that, you know, maybe you could convince some of your neighbors to join you, but that might be hard because they're probably not going to want to. And you might have to, well, actually, no, we don't have enough diplomats to do it. But you might have to subjugate them or get them to like you one way or another. But you can invite more of the other nations here to join your Lordship of Ireland. And then eventually, once you control the whole island under it, you could claim the kingdom, and then you can eventually form Ireland is one way you can do it through this. But we can't do that just yet because requirement is every location in Ireland must either be owned or must be owned by a member of the Lordship of Ireland. So either we need to own it directly, or we need to have invited everyone to be members of this. And then also we can't have enacted law debiliter, one of those laws, which if we look under the law, it looks like we might have that as our law right now. So we might need to go in there and change that eventually to, I was going to say, yeah, if you click on it, we can spend some resources. So we can try to change that law of, this gives a bunch of different modifiers. So like a religious, the statutes of Kilkenny, which looks like gives us some big time pop assimilation speed bonus plus 100. So that might be one way to do it, or I guess you could just get rid of the law entirely. Rule of Ireland is repealed in Lordship of Ireland. I don't know if we want to do that. Anyway, so you can go in there and change that, or try to change it. There's several other actions here we could do. So if we weren't the Lord of Ireland, we weren't playing as the Pale, we could maybe leave the lordship, leave the organization entirely if we were like one of the vassals, which might not be a great move to make, but eventually if you wanted to be playing as like Desmond and go independent, you could maybe do that. You could do the surrender and re-grant, which it says, and we would invite them to surrender their kingship, and in return we'll give them feudal titles under our system. I'm not sure what conditions you would need to meet to actually do that, or what that would look like, but no one wants to do it just yet. But basically you would try to pull in one of those Irish countries into your system. There's some regency options here, like if one of your vassals, I guess, had a regent, you could like just take them over as leader because they have a regent. This Infioff regency, you would make a subjugated country and make them a fiefdom. Again, it doesn't say exactly what the requirements are to do that, so I don't understand exactly how that one works. There's this request planters. If you have enough prestige, we can basically have people come from Britain and move to a location in our country for a while. So that could be a good way to like infuse a certain part of Ireland. But those are going to be English ops probably coming into your country, so that's kind of a thing to consider. But you could get some immigration going in a certain location if you wanted to. But really, one that's going to be very useful that you'll definitely want to look at is acquire casus belli. This is a special way to get a casus belli that lets you go to war with someone and subjugate them through this action as the lord to try to force them into the lordship of Ireland. Now, it does have a cost. It costs legitimacy. It also costs religious influence, which is one of the things under the religion tab. Where did it go? You can see that we have 104 religious influence. And so we only gain 0.25 a month. There's various things that can affect that, but it's pretty slow going. So that is kind of a precious resource to spend. The one place I've used it somewhere later in the save game was if you get up to 150, you can make one of your past leaders be a saint, which then you can canonize them as a saint, which then gives you some bonuses. I played long enough into this save later that I got to 150 and it'll pop up and let you know you can do that. And then basically like the better one of your rulers was, the better modifiers, the bonuses you get. So you could do that and make like, if you had some great ruler in the past who had really good stats and everything, you could canonize them into a saint and get a bonus is one other way you can spend that religious influence that I've seen. But one way you might want to spend it is here, getting the subjugation casus belli, which you could use on your Irish neighbors, and then that lets you conquer them and then make them a subject and then eventually force them into your country through annexation. And yeah, because one of the big differences between EU 4 and 5 is that getting a casus belli that lets you attack someone and take their territory without it being like a huge hit to your stability and your aggression, whatever it's called in this game, your bad boy score is what it was in the older games, but I think it's antagonism, something like that, is a stat that if it gets too high, it makes like everyone around you not like you because you're being too aggressive, and you get a bunch of negatives from that. But you could use this to get a legitimate casus belli to then subjugate one of these countries. So let's say we want to do it to Munster, and we can say, all right, just like that, we have the subjugation casus belli on them for 5 years. So, and it's not even one you have to wait for it to, because the other ones you can form over time, but this one you just immediately get it. You can press it and say, all right, we're going to subjugate Munster. We're going to fight a war with Munster. We're going to subjugate them and then force them to be, we're not going to get if we subjugate them, we don't get all the negative modifiers. And then we can just force them to become our vassal and then eventually force them to be annexed into our country. So that's a way we could do that versus fighting just a naked war of conquering, which is like hits your stability quite a bit. So, yes, some definite benefits to looking into this menu from the beginning of the game and using it. There's some really powerful stuff there. So I wanted to make you aware of that and how you can use that to further your goals here playing as the Pale. So if we hover here, we can see which countries are, or which places are parts of that culture, or where it's the primary culture. And we can see it'll show dominant, the one where the majority of people are that culture. And you can see, okay, it makes sense. Clan Ricard, the big blue area here, the biggest Irish state left, is the dominant Irish country. And then Anglo-Irish is actually the Earldom of Ulster, because they have... Actually, I think it should change to us. Maybe we just changed it here. Let me see if it ticks forward, if that'll change. And then English, of course, is the Kingdom of England, where all the English people live. And let's see if I get to the end of the month if that updates. Okay, yeah, I think because I had just done this, so now, since I have way more people, so now Lordship of the Pale is dominant. So whenever your country is the dominant country of a particular primary culture, you get access to a special diplomatic action, which if we look here, under friendly, is ask to improve cultural opinion. So you can ask, if you're the dominant, you can ask another dominant nation, or a nation that's the dominant of their culture, to improve the cultures between each other. And so if we do that right now, we can see Durham and Aquitaine. We can make the Gascon culture change their view of Anglo-Irish to positive, or same thing there, change Northumbrian's view to be kindred. Now the trick though is, why can't I do other places? If I select them, I can't do it because we need 50 favors to do that. And getting to 50 favors is a real trick whenever your countries are not in a great relationship to start with. Because I can get those 50 favors from England because I'm like their vassal, and like helping them in wars keeps generating that. So I was looking at trying to see how you can increase that. And it's actually pretty difficult for this current situation. So if we open up diplomatic actions, you can see curry favors is right here. And so they're like, okay, that increases favors between you and them. But the trick is that the limit is 25, and the 25 limit isn't just one way or the other, it's the total. So but how much you owe them and they owe you added together makes a limit of 25. So I need 50 to ask them to improve that, but I only have 12.5, which is a pretty big gap to overcome without finding a way to like be their friend and help them in wars and stuff. I think there may be some other ways to increase that, but put in the comments again, because I looked at, if you look at favors, it doesn't explain it entirely like how you can generate these other than this action. But this action costs way more than you can get that way, which I guess makes sense. You can't just force two cultures to like each other without some kind of out of the normal action, like helping their country in a war to generate those extra favors. Because like with England, I have 79 favors. I think it can go up to like 100, but those are way over. Like they're all ones they owe me because I helped them in wars, and then I can use those. And then the reason I'm able to ask those other smaller ones is because I believe it's because they are under England, and so it lets me use those 79 favors I have with England to ask their vassals to improve their culture, which is kind of a very, it took me a little experimenting to figure out like, why can I do that with these two places but not anywhere else? And that is why, is because we have those favors through being vassals of England. And then I think I read somewhere, I haven't got far enough to try it yet, if I were to find a way, find a way, I know a way now with can do the Casus Belli. If I say do this, subjugate Casus Belli against Clan Ricard, and then if I fight a war against them and force them to become my vassal or subject, I think then, I think I read somewhere you can then get that action to basically force your cultures to like each other. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. So I'm going to try that between now and the next video and see if that will work, making them be my vassal, and then seeing if that becomes some kind of option to force them to improve relations between our cultures. Or I don't know what happens if you just conquer all of Ireland and then make Irish be accepted. Is like that, then it becomes like an internal thing. Like all the Irish people in the world, or 99% of them, are now in my country. Shouldn't I have some kind of option to make my cultures get along with each other? Maybe you can do that again once I figure that out, or if you know, put it in the comments. But I'll try to do that in a future video. At least do the subject one and see if that works, because finding a way to get them to be at least accepted or friendly or kindred, you know, that makes all my like internal friction problems go away if we can figure out a way to do that. But that again, that's like, obviously it makes sense. Like that's a big change over a long period of time that would happen. So it's not something you can easily do in the game. You can't just force it right away. You kind of have to kind of work for it. But it's important for us if we want our country to be in harmony and all be happy by the end of the game. All right, and then final thought. Alternatively, instead of trying to make cultures as a whole get along with each other, we could instead assimilate people into our primary culture. So we look here and say we've got a long way to go on this. We have 3/4 Irish, but we already have 1/4 or a fifth at least are Anglo-Irish. And so if we converted people to that over time, then the root of our problem goes away. We just have one big culture that's already the primary culture, instead of trying to switch it to be Irish or getting the Irish and the English to get along with each other. It might be easier to just, over the course of a couple centuries, just make everyone be Anglo-Irish. So there's different ways you can do that. We already saw like you can change the law to increase it a little bit. You can do things to bump up your cultural tradition and influence, which will just kind of passively improve that. But right now, because the choices we made, that's like minus 116%. So not making much progress there through just passive change. Or we could take a cabinet action. There may be other things as well. I'm sure there's like some buildings or something you can use to do this that I haven't got to yet. But we can take a cabinet action right away to assimilate pops into our culture, uses the diplomacy stat, and then you get this plus 40 baseline bonus that's going to be altered depending on your other things. But if we click on that, we want to make sure we make the right choices here. We want to select the culture to steer towards. So we want to steer towards Anglo-Irish. And then, oh, no, that didn't do what I wanted to. Clicked on it and took me to that. All right, so we want to steer towards Anglo-Irish, and then you can only do it one province at a time. So now, since I fought wars and conquered a big chunk of the island, we now have these huge, many areas. We can only steer one at a time towards it, and we can see that in a lot of these places, it's currently at 0%. So we got a long way to go there. So maybe we would start at the places that are already, like Wexford is already 3/4 of the way there. 45,000 people live there, so maybe we convert all of them over. And probably, I'm assuming here, I don't know this for sure, kind of as you assimilate more and more people, that influence would spread a bit, and you get some passive improvements over time of having more people be the primary culture to start with. But let's say, yeah, we start with Wexford, and we say, okay, and now that one province is going to be converting over to Anglo-Irish from being either English or Irish, but that's gonna take a while. It looks like it's changing by 28 per month, and there's thousands of people there, so that's a very long, gradual path to solving the problem that way. But that is an option that you could take. And then, of course, there are things like it's really slow because we have these huge negative modifiers here, so maybe solve this problem first before trying that strategy. I just wanted to touch on that as another option, another way to do it. If you have any other things that I haven't got to yet in this regard, be sure to throw them in the comments. I said that a lot in this video because now I'm at the point of the game where I'm taking these decisions that aren't immediately obvious what they do or the best way to go about it. They're just different options that you have, but all part of the game. And of course, getting more of these slots and making them more efficient, making that stuff more efficient, could solve that problem. I love how the game, there's so many things, and each little individual thing doesn't always seem important or not right away. It's not apparent right away. Like, why do I care about the strength of my cultural tradition, of my primary culture? Well, if, say, you want everyone in your country to get along and have high happiness and all pay their taxes, you need to, one way to do it is to have really high cultural tradition where everyone wants to be Anglo-Irish, and it just passively spreads across the country, and then that number goes up on its own faster, where right now we're having to do it this very manual, very slow way where it's going to take a long time. I don't know if it even gives us like a timeline on here. Some of these actions will tell you how long it's going to take, and some do not. That one, I'm guessing, quite a while. But anyway, be sure hit like and subscribe. That's probably gone on quite long enough for this video, and in the next video I'm going to play forward some more. I'm going to try all that stuff I talked about for the next video, see what works, what doesn't. And I think I'm not too far away from being able to conquer the whole island and make it all be the Pale, but then that still leaves us with the question of, okay, what now? If we control all of Ireland, but we have zero control, true control over 3/4 of it, or half of it anyway, how do we solve that problem as well? So plenty more to come. I still haven't done a video on war, so maybe we'll do that. That'd probably be a good one for the next video, my war with Clan Ricard to subjugate them. So yeah, I think I just figured it out. Next video, we will go to war. We'll see what that looks like, some of our options, and see if we can conquer the biggest chunk of the rest of Ireland right there. So stay tuned for next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.